security gate at the big house in Ikoyi slammed shut like a judge's hammer. Ethan Walker stood outside in the rain, barefoot on wet pavement, holding one small nylon bag, like it was the last thing he owned on earth. Inside the gate, his own family watched him like he was a stranger. Not just watched, smiled. His brother Brandon leaned on Ethan's black Range Rover and tossed the car key from hand to hand, slow and proud. Ethan's wife, Claire, didn't even try to hide her disgust. She stood under the porch light, dry and warm, with her arms crossed tight. "You can't fool us," she shouted over the rain. "We know you still have money somewhere, but you won't use us again." Ethan blinked hard. Rain slid down his face like tears. He didn't wipe it away. He just stared. Because this wasn't happening by accident. He planned it. He told himself this test would be clean. A simple act, a small lie to see who stayed close when the lights went off. But nobody warned him it would hurt like this. The gate intercom crackled. The house guard cleared his throat like he felt shy about what he was about to do. "Sir," the guard said to Ethan. "Madam said, you should not stand here again. If you don't leave, she will call police." Ethan's chest tightened. Claire, his wife, had just called him a problem in front of everyone. Ethan lifted his eyes to the balcony. That was where his mother, Laura, always sat in the evening with a cup of tea. She liked watching the street like it was a movie. Tonight, she was there too, only she wasn't holding tea, she was holding a pen, and beside her was a man in a suit, holding papers on a clipboard. Ethan's heart jumped. "What is that?" he whispered. But his voice got swallowed by thunder. Then his mother looked down at him, shook her head once, and signed. Ethan took one step forward, confused. "Mom?" he called. "What did you just sign?" Laura didn't answer. She turned away, like she didn't know him. The suited man tucked the papers into a brown envelope. He smiled at Claire, like they were celebrating something. Ethan's mouth went dry. He didn't even feel the rain anymore. And right there, right in his pocket, his phone buzzed. A message popped up on his cracked screen. "Account status. Frozen. All access restricted." Ethan's breath caught. Because that message wasn't supposed to come. Not yet. Not like this. He looked up again at the balcony, at his mother, at the envelope, at Claire's face, and in that moment, Ethan realized he might have started a fire he could not control. Then Brandon lifted Ethan's car key high in the air and shouted, "Everyone should hear this. The great Ethan Walker is broke." The family behind him laughed. Loud. Sharp, like they had been waiting years to do it. Ethan's hands shook, but he didn't beg. He didn't shout. He just stared, because his mind was racing back to the beginning, back to the day he decided to test them. 3 weeks earlier, Lagos was bright and busy, the way it always is when the city is pretending it has no problems. Ethan Walker drove through Victoria Island in a clean white Prado. Windows up, soft music playing. People knew his name in that part of town. Not because he talked too much, because he built too much. Ethan owned Walker Harbour Group, a company that built and managed properties, tall glass buildings, smart offices, estates, with neat roads and working streetlights. He was the kind of man people called young billionaire, even though he was 38 and tired most days. He didn't dress flashy. He didn't post online. His wealth was quiet. But his family was loud enough for all of Lagos. Brandon, his younger brother, always acted like Ethan's money was their family inheritance, not Ethan's sweat. Laura, their mother, liked to remind everyone that she raised Ethan like that was a business plan. And Claire, his wife, loved the comfort, the trips, the nice friends, the way people greeted her like she was royalty. Ethan tried not to notice the little things, like how Claire only smiled big when cameras were around, or how Brandon only called when he needed something, or how his mother always said, "A son must carry his family," even when the family didn't carry Ethan. Still, Ethan believed they loved him. He wanted to believe it. Then, one Tuesday morning, his assistant, a calm woman named Jasmine, walked into his office in Lekki Phase 1 with a brown file in her hands. "Sir," she said carefully, "we need to talk." Ethan looked up from his laptop. "Did we lose a property deal?" Jasmine swallowed. "No, it's not about business. It's about your home accounts." Ethan frowned. "What about them?" Jasmine opened the file. Inside were bank alerts, transfers, and signatures. Many of them were not Ethan's. He leaned forward slowly. "Why is Brandon withdrawing money from my investment account?" Ethan asked, voice low. Jasmine pointed to a line. "And why is Madame Claire approving it, sir?" Ethan sat back like someone had pushed him. "Claire approved." "Brandon?" he repeated. Jasmine nodded, eyes soft. "The bank called last week. They said it's not the first time." Ethan held the file with both hands. His fingers tightened around the paper until it creased. For a full minute, he said nothing. Lagos noise floated in from outside horns, distant shouting, a generator humming. Life was normal, but inside Ethan, something cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a glass cup breaking underwater. He wanted to storm home and ask questions. He wanted to slam the file on the dining table and demand answers. But something stopped him, because he remembered what his late father used to say. "Son, money reveals people. When the money is strong, people act sweet. When the money is gone, you will see who they really are." Ethan had laughed at that line when he was younger. Now it didn't feel like a joke. That evening, he drove home to Ikoyi and watched his family like he was seeing them for the first time. Claire complained about the chef's rice being too local. Brandon bragged about a new idea for a tech business that Ethan should fund. Nora reminded Ethan that her women's meeting needed new chairs and a small donation. They all spoke to him like his money was a tap that should never close. And not one person asked Ethan how his day was. Not one. Ethan went upstairs and sat alone in his bedroom, lights off, city glow spilling through the curtains. He called his childhood friend, his lawyer Mark Peterson. Mark was American too, just like Ethan. They both grew up in Houston before Ethan's parents brought them back to Nigeria. Mark picked on the first ring. "Ethan? You sound like someone died." Ethan stared at the wall. "Not dead," he said, "but maybe sleeping." "What happened?" Ethan hesitated. Then he said it. "I think my family loves my money more than they love me." There was a pause. Mark didn't rush him. That's what Ethan liked about him. Finally Mark said, "Do you want proof? Or do you want peace?" Ethan swallowed. "Proof. Then test it," Mark said, not with anger, with silence. With a story they can't control. Ethan's voice broke a little. "I can't believe I'm here, Mark." "I can," Mark said gently. "So, what's the plan?" Ethan stared at the dark ceiling, feeling both scared and determined. "I'll pretend I lost everything," he said. "No access. No cars. No accounts. No staff. Just me." Mark inhaled. "That's risky." "I know," Ethan whispered. "But I need to know who stays." Mark paused again, then asked, "And if nobody stays?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I'll survive," he said, but it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Mark's voice turned serious. "If you do this, we do it properly. Legal papers, locked accounts, cameras if needed. And you must be ready for what you might see." Ethan nodded, even though Mark couldn't see him. "I'm ready." Ethan lied, because he wasn't ready. Not for tonight, not for the gate, not for his mother's signature, not for that bank alert that wasn't supposed to come yet. Back outside the Ikoyi house, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message. "Court order filed." Ethan's eyes widened. Claire's laughter floated from inside the gate, sharp like broken glass, and as the rain poured harder, Ethan realized the test had changed. Somebody had moved faster than his plan. Somebody had made it real. He looked through the bars of the gate, and the suited man stepped out from the front door and began walking toward him, holding that same brown envelope. Ethan's heart hammered, because the man wasn't coming to explain. He was coming to deliver something that could destroy Ethan's life for real. The man stopped at the gate, slid the envelope through a small opening, and said softly, "Mr. Walker, you've been removed." Ethan's hands went cold as he reached for the envelope, and the gate clicked again, locked tighter than before. Ethan's fingers shook as he tore the envelope open. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the paper, smearing the ink just a little. He didn't care. He read anyway. Notice of temporary removal from residential property. His brain froze. He read the first line again. Then again. "What?" he whispered. The security guard stood a few steps back, pretending not to watch. Brandon's laughter had stopped inside the house. The night suddenly felt too quiet. Like Lagos itself was holding its breath. Ethan skimmed the page, heart pounding harder with every word. Court order, emergency filing, spousal request, immediate effect. His eyes jumped to the signature. Claire Walker. Ethan felt something drop inside his chest. Not anger. Not shock. Something heavier. He pressed the paper to his chest for a second, like it might stop his heart from breaking apart. "So, it's real," he muttered. He looked up at the balcony again. His mother was gone. The chair she always sat on was empty. That hurt more than the paper. The suited man cleared his throat. "Sir, I advise you move quietly. This is already filed. Any resistance will complicate things." Ethan laughed once. It came out wrong. Short. Dry. "Complicate what?" he asked. "My life?" The man didn't answer. Ethan folded the paper slowly, carefully, and slid it back into the envelope. He placed it inside his nylon bag, like it was something fragile. Then he turned away from the gate. Each step felt strange, like he was walking without bones. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he could not stay there. An hour later, Ethan sat on a wooden bench outside a closed pharmacy in Oberlande. Cars passed. People walked by. Nobody noticed him. For the first time in years, Ethan Walker was invisible. He pulled his phone out again. No signal, no data, no access to his banking apps. That wasn't part of the plan. Mark was supposed to control the timing. The freeze was meant to come later, carefully, slowly. Ethan dialed Mark's number anyway. It rang once, twice. Then Mark picked up, breathing fast. "Ethan, where are you?" Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Outside, in the rain. Apparently, I don't live in my own house anymore." Silence. Then Mark cursed softly. "They moved faster than I thought." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. Mark exhaled. "Claire filed an emergency motion this afternoon. Claimed you were unstable, that you were hiding assets, that she feared for her safety." Ethan's mouth fell open. "Safety? I haven't raised my voice at her in 10 years. "I know," Mark said quickly, "but fear on paper doesn't need proof. Not at first." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "And my accounts?" "Frozen because the court wants to preserve marital assets," Mark said. "I was trying to slow it down, but someone inside the bank cooperated." Ethan closed his eyes. "Brandon," he whispered. Mark didn't argue. "I told you this test was dangerous." Mark continued. "They think you're weak right now, and people do ugly things when they think the lion is sick." Ethan stared at the wet street. "So what do I do?" "You stay calm," Mark said. "And you stay out of sight. If they think you're gone, they'll show their full hand." Ethan laughed bitterly. "They already threw me out." "Yes," Mark said. But now they'll talk. Spend. Sign things. Make mistakes. Ethan was quiet. Then he said, Mark, my mother signed something. Mark paused. Signed what? I don't know, Ethan replied. But she didn't look confused. She looked decided. Mark's voice softened. Ethan, sometimes parents choose comfort over conscience. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It means they're human. Ethan swallowed. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, Mark said honestly. It's supposed to make you ready. Ethan ended the call and sat there for a long time. Rain slowed to a drizzle. His phone battery dropped to 10%. That's when someone sat beside him. A woman. She was older, maybe late 50s. Wearing a plain blue wrapper and a rain jacket that had seen better days, she smelled faintly of soap. You look like a man who just lost something, she said gently. Ethan glanced at her. That obvious? She smiled. I sell oranges here in the mornings. I've seen many faces. Yours is the... Everything collapsed at one's face. Ethan surprised himself by smiling back, just a little. I'm Ethan, he said. Ruth, she replied. You hungry? He hesitated, then nodded. She pulled out a small nylon bag and handed him a meat pie. Still warm, Ethan stared at it. His throat tightened again. Thank you, he said quietly. As he ate, he realized something strange. This woman, a stranger, had offered him food without knowing his name, his job, or his worth. At home, nobody offered him kindness without asking what they would get back. The thought stung. Across town, in the Ikoyi house, champagne popped. Claire stood in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like a general who had just won a battle. Yes, she said sharply. The court order is done. He's out. She smiled. No. He didn't fight. He just stood there. Like he already knew. She ended the call and turned to Brandon, who was sitting on the couch with his feet up. You see? Claire said. I told you. He was bluffing. All that I lost everything story was nonsense. Brandon grinned. So what now? Now, Claire said, we protect ourselves. She walked to the drawer, pulled out another file, and tossed it on the table. Brandon's smile faded. What's that? Power of attorney, Claire replied. Mum signed hers already. Brandon's eyes widened. Seriously? Claire nodded. She said Ethan has changed. That he's not thinking straight. Brandon leaned back, impressed. Smart woman. Claire didn't smile. She looked toward the staircase instead, where Nora was slowly coming down, holding the railing. Nora's face looked tired. Claire softened her voice. Mum, you okay? Nora nodded. I don't like fights. Claire stepped closer and took her arm. This isn't a fight. This is safety. Nora looked away. Ethan didn't even argue. Claire's eyes hardened for a second. That's because guilty people don't argue. Nora said nothing, but her hand trembled. Later that night, Brandon sat alone in Ethan's old study. He opened drawers, cabinets, a small safe behind a painting. Empty. Brandon frowned. That's strange, he muttered. He searched again. Still nothing. No backup cards, no hidden documents, no emergency cash. A chill ran through him. What if, he whispered to himself, he really doesn't have anything left? Brandon shook his head. No, impossible, but doubt had already crept in. And doubt is loud when the house is quiet. Back on the bench, Ethan finished the meat pie and handed the empty bag back to Ruth. Thank you, he said again. She nodded. Where will you sleep tonight? Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly. I don't know. Ruth studied his face. There's a small church hall 2 streets down. The caretaker lets people stay sometimes. Ethan blinked. Why are you helping me? Ruth smiled sadly. Because one day, I was the one on this bench. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He stood up slowly, joints stiff. As he followed Ruth down the dim street, his phone buzzed one last time before dying. A message. Unknown number. Stop pretending. Ethan. You're not fooling anyone. His phone went dark. Ethan stared at the blank screen. Because the message wasn't from Claire. Or Brandon. Or Mark. Someone else was watching. And they knew his test. Ethan did not sleep that night. The church hall smelled like old wood and candle wax. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering like it was tired too. Thin mattresses were spread across the floor, spaced far apart. Some people snored softly. Others whispered prayers into the dark. Ethan lay on his back, hands folded on his chest, staring at the ceiling. Every sound felt loud. A cough. A footstep, the wind brushing the windows. He replayed the day again and again. The gate, the envelope, his mother's pen touching paper. He wasn't angry yet. That scared him. Anger would have been easier. Instead, there was confusion. And something worse. Grief. Around 4A, the caretaker, an old man named Samuel, padded across the hall with a lantern. You okay? Son? He asked quietly. Ethan nodded. Yes, sir. Just thinking. Samuel smiled gently. Thinking keeps people awake. Morning will come soon. Ethan watched him walk away and wondered when morning stopped, meaning hope, and started meaning survival. By 8 a.m., Ikoyi was already alive. Inside the big house, Claire stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her earrings. Gold. Heavy. Loud. She liked them. They made noise when she moved. They made people notice. She picked up her phone and scrolled through messages. One from her friend Melissa caught her eye. Girl, is it true Ethan lost everything? Claire smiled and typed back. Yes. Sad, but life moves on. She paused, then added another line. I'm strong. I'll manage. She put the phone down and admired herself again. Behind her, the bedroom door opened quietly. Nora stepped in, wrapped in a light shawl. Good morning, Nora said. Claire didn't turn. Morning, Mum. Nora watched her for a moment. I dreamed about Ethan. Claire sighed. Mum, please. Not today. Nora's voice trembled slightly. He was standing in the rain, just like yesterday. Claire turned sharply. Dreams don't mean anything. They sometimes do, Nora said softly. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice. Listen to me. Ethan is not okay. He needs help, and right now, help means control. We are protecting him. Nora looked at the floor. From what? From himself, Claire replied quickly. Nora didn't answer. She walked out slowly. Claire watched her go, irritation flashing across her face. Then she grabbed her handbag and headed downstairs. Brandon was already in the living room, on the phone, pacing. Yes, he said confidently. The space is available. My brother owned it. I'm handling things now. He paused, listening. Of course it's clean. Prime location. Lecky view. Claire stopped at the foot of the stairs. What are you doing? She asked. Brandon covered the phone. Leasing one of Ethan's office floors. Easy cash. Claire's eyes narrowed. Did you check the documents? Brandon waved her off. Relax. He's broke. The company will collapse anyway. Claire crossed her arms. You don't move assets without legal cover. Brandon scoffed. You sound scared. Claire stepped closer. I sound smart. Brandon rolled his eyes and returned to his call. Claire watched him, uneasy. Because deep down, she knew something Brandon didn't. Ethan was not careless. He was quiet. And quiet men usually build doors you don't see until they close. At 10 a.m., Ethan sat on the steps outside the church hall, holding a paper cup of tea. Ruth stood nearby, arranging oranges in neat piles on a tray. "You didn't sleep," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious?" She nodded. "Your eyes are loud." Ethan chuckled despite himself. "That's a new one." Ruth handed him an orange. "Eat. It helps the head." He peeled it slowly. The smell was fresh. "Clean." "Ruth," he said suddenly, "do you believe people change? Or just reveal?" She thought for a moment. "People reveal. Change is hard. Revealing is easy." Ethan nodded. He reached into his pocket and found nothing. No wallet, no cards, just his old watch. Scratched. Simple. He removed it and stared at it. For years, he measured time in deals and meetings. Now, time felt heavy, thick, as if every second had weight. That's when he felt it again. The feeling of being watched. Ethan looked up. Across the street, a black SUV sat parked. Engine off. Windows dark. It hadn't been there earlier. His stomach tightened. He told himself not to imagine things, but imagination didn't explain why the SUV stayed. Even when people passed, even when time moved. Back in Ikoyi, a visitor arrived, Mark Peterson. He stood at the gate, calm but alert. Claire answered the intercom herself. "Yes?" "Mark Peterson," he said, "Ethan's lawyer." Claire's lips tightened. "Ethan isn't here." "I know." Mark replied evenly. "I'm here about his property." Claire hesitated, then buzzed the gate open. Mark stepped in, eyes scanning the compound. "Nice place," he said casually. Claire folded her arms. "What do you want?" Mark smiled slightly. "To remind you of something." He pulled out a document. "This house," he said, tapping the paper, "is not jointly owned." Claire stiffened. "What do you mean?" "It belongs to Walker Harbor Holdings." Mark replied. "Not Ethan personally. Not you. Not the marriage." Brandon appeared behind her. "That's nonsense." Mark looked at him. "You should stop renting things that aren't yours." Brandon's face drained of color. Claire swallowed. "Ethan told me everything was shared." Mark tilted his head. "Ethan tells people what they need to hear to feel safe." Silence filled the room. Mark straightened. "Also, any signatures obtained under emotional pressure can be challenged." Nora stepped forward suddenly. "I wasn't pressured," she said quickly. Mark looked at her gently. "Ma'am, did anyone tell you Ethan was mentally unstable?" Nora hesitated. Claire jumped in. "We were worried." Mark nodded slowly. "Worry becomes control very fast." He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Tell Ethan to come home," Nora said quietly. Mark looked back. "Home is where truth is welcome." Then he left. Claire sank onto the couch. Her confidence cracked just a little. That evening, the black SUV followed Ethan. Not close, just enough. He noticed it again near the bus stop, again near the market. Finally, he stopped walking. The SUV stopped too. A door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Clean suit, no smile. "Mr. Walker," the man said calmly. "We need to talk." Ethan's heart pounded. "About what?" he asked. The man looked at him like a puzzle. "About how your family believes you are finished," he said, "and how dangerous that belief can become." Ethan swallowed. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "But the money you lost, someone else wants it." Ethan's breath caught, because he suddenly understood. This test was no longer about love, it was about survival. Ethan did not answer the man right away. The streetlight above them flickered, buzzing like it was unsure whether to stay on or go dark. A bus roared past, spraying dirty water onto the road. Life kept moving, even as Ethan's world tightened around him. Destroy what I built, how? Ethan asked finally. The man studied him, then glanced around before speaking again. Your brother is signing things he doesn't understand. Your wife is approving things she thinks are hers. And your mother? He paused. Your mother is being used as proof. Ethan felt a cold line run down his spine. Proof of what? That you're no longer in control. The man replied. That the door is open. Ethan clenched his fists. Who sent you? No one sent me, the man said calmly. I follow movements. When a lion disappears, hyenas gather. Lagos is full of them. Ethan let out a slow breath. So why warn me? The man's eyes softened just a little. Because if they finish stripping your company, innocent people will lose their jobs, and because I don't like chaos. Ethan nodded slowly. What do you want? Nothing, the man said. Yet. He stepped back, returned to the SUV, and drove off without another word. Ethan stood there long after the taillights vanished. For the first time since this began, fear wrapped fully around his chest. Not fear of losing comfort. Fear of losing responsibility. Walker Harbor Group employed over 300 people. Families, rent, school fees. All of it could vanish if this went wrong. Ethan whispered to himself. I stayed silent too long. The next morning, Claire sat at the dining table with her laptop open. Coffee untouched. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something wasn't right. The calls she expected from banks had not come. The emails she expected from investors had gone quiet, and the confidence she felt yesterday now felt thin. Brandon walked in, excited. Guess what? I found a buyer for the Lekki office floor. Cash. Claire looked up sharply. Did you get written approval? Brandon shrugged. Why are you acting like a lawyer now? Claire slammed her laptop shut. Because lawyers are the only people who don't panic later. Brandon scoffed. You're scared because Mark showed up. Claire's jaw tightened. I'm scared because Ethan is smarter than you think. Brandon leaned in. Or maybe he's finished. Claire looked at him for a long second. Then she said quietly, Finished men don't leave traps. That word hung in the air. Traps. Brandon's smile faded. Across town, Laura sat alone in her room. The house felt too big. Too quiet. She held her phone, scrolling through old photos of Ethan. Ethan at 10, smiling with missing teeth. Ethan at college graduation, hugging her tightly. Ethan standing proudly in front of his first completed building. Her hands trembled. She opened her messages, typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, she pressed send. Are you safe? The message showed as delivered. No reply. Nora's chest tightened. She stood suddenly, grabbed her shawl, and headed for the door. Back at the church hall, Ethan packed his few belongings. Ruth watched him. You're leaving? Ethan nodded. I have to. She frowned. To where? He hesitated. Closer to the fire. Ruth sighed. Men like you always walk toward storms. Ethan smiled faintly. Someone has to stand in them. Ruth pressed a folded note into his hand. Call this number if you need a place to hide. Ethan looked at it. Touched. Thank you. She nodded. Kindness returns. Just not always from the same people. Ethan stepped out, phone charged now, mind sharper. He called Mark. I waited too long, Ethan said without greeting. They're moving assets. Mark exhaled. I know. I've been blocking what I can. I want to step back in, Ethan said. Mark paused. Are you ready for what that means? Ethan's voice was steady. No, but I'm responsible. Mark nodded. Then we move carefully. Not loud, not emotional. Ethan agreed. They ended the call. Ethan looked up. The city stretched before him. Busy and unaware, the This test was no longer private. That afternoon, Claire received an email. Subject line: Internal review notice. Her heart skipped. She opened it. Walker Harbor Group was conducting an internal compliance review. All unauthorized transactions were suspended. All signatories were under audit. Her hands went cold. She rushed into Brandon's room. What did you sign? Brandon's face went pale. Nothing illegal. Claire's voice rose. Did you sign anything without reading it? Brandon looked away. Claire felt her knees weaken. Brandon, she whispered, Ethan is back. At sunset, Ethan stood across the street from his old house. He didn't go in. He watched. Lights turned on. Shadows moved. Voices floated faintly. This house had been loud with laughter before. Now it sounded like whispers. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You waited long enough. Then another message followed immediately. Come home, or lose everything. Ethan stared at the gate. His heart pounded. The test had reached its breaking point, and someone was forcing his hand. The police lights painted the street in red and blue. Ethan froze. Not because he was afraid of the police, but because he knew who called them. The black SUV was parked farther down the road now, half hidden. The same man from before stood beside it, watching. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just waited. 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the Ikoyi house. Officers stepped out calmly, not rushing, not shouting. This was not an emergency call. This was a planned one. Ethan stepped back into the shadows and watched. Claire opened the door herself. She smiled too quickly, the way people do when they are trying to look innocent. Brandon stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. The officers spoke quietly. Papers were shown. Heads nodded. Then one officer said something that made Claire's smile vanish. No, ma'am, this is not about him returning. This is about assets moved without authorization. Brandon's head snapped up. Ethan felt his chest tighten. So it had begun. The truth wasn't arriving gently. It was kicking the door down. Inside the house, everything fell apart at once. Claire's phone rang. Then rang again. Then again. Banks. Lawyers. A board member who never called her directly before. Her hands shook as she answered the last call. Yes? She said, voice thin. There was a pause. Then her face drained of color. What do you mean reversed? She whispered. That money is already... The call ended. Claire slowly lowered the phone. Brandon stared at her. What happened? She swallowed hard. The transactions... They're being rolled back. Brandon laughed nervously. That's not possible. Claire turned on him. You signed things you didn't understand. Brandon stepped back. You told me it was fine. I told you to wait, she shouted. Their voices echoed through the house. Upstairs, Laura sat on her bed. Hands clasped together. Tears running silently down her face. She had just received a message. From Ethan. Mom, I'm okay. But I needed to know who stayed honest when I was gone. Her chest tightened. She stood slowly, as if her bones were heavier than before, and walked downstairs. The arguing stopped when they saw her. Laura looked at them both. You used fear to push me, she said softly. You told me my son was broken. Claire opened her mouth. Mom. Laura raised a shaking hand. Enough. She turned toward the door. I am going to see my son. Across the street, Ethan watched his mother step outside. For a second, he didn't move. Then he stepped forward. Laura, he said. She turned. And when she saw him standing there, alive, calm, whole, her legs nearly gave out. Ethan, she whispered. She reached him and held his face with both hands, like she needed to make sure he was real. I'm sorry, she said, crying openly now. I was afraid. They said you were not yourself. Ethan closed his eyes. I know. He didn't shout. That hurt more. Nora sobbed. I chose peace instead of truth. Ethan nodded slowly, and that choice cost us something. Behind her, Claire stood frozen in the doorway. Brandon hovered a few steps behind, his confidence completely gone. Claire looked at Ethan like she was seeing him for the first time. Not as a provider, not as a shield, but as a man she no longer understood. So this was all a game? She asked, sharply. Ethan's eyes met hers. No, he said calmly. It was a question. Brandon scoffed weakly. And what was the answer? Ethan took a breath. The answer, he said, is that love doesn't survive fear and greed living in the same house. Claire's face hardened. You embarrassed us. Ethan tilted his head. You removed me from my own home. Silence fell. The police officers approached again, professional and calm. Mr. Walker, one said, we need you to confirm something. Ethan nodded. The officer continued. Did you authorize any of the recent transfers made under your name? Ethan looked at Claire. At Brandon. Then, back at the officer. No. He said clearly. I did not. Claire's breath caught. Brandon's shoulders slumped. That single sentence changed everything. By morning, the house no longer felt like a victory ground. Lawyers came and went. Documents were collected. Accounts were locked again, this time under Ethan's control. But something else was locked too. Trust. Ethan sat alone in his old study, the same room Brandon had searched days earlier. It felt smaller now, not because it had changed, because Ethan had. Mark sat across from him. You won. Ethan shook his head slowly. No. I learned. Mark watched him carefully. And what did you learn? Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. That some people love you because you are useful, he said. That fear makes people cruel. And that tests don't strengthen relationships. They expose fractures that were already there. Mark nodded. What about Claire? Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. She loved the life, he said quietly. Not the man. And your brother? Jealousy, Ethan replied. Long and quiet. It just needed permission. And your mother? Ethan's voice softened. Fear and regret. Mark stood. So what happens now? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Outside, Lagos moved on. Horns. Voices. Life. Finally, Ethan said, Now I rebuild. But not the same way. Mark smiled faintly. Careful men build walls. Wise men build boundaries. Ethan nodded. He stood up and walked to the window. The test was over. The truth had spoken. And some losses, once revealed, were permanent. What is your view about this story? Where are you watching from? Do well to let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. Stay blessed.